Okay guys, so the last video we did a exporting nation where the price that the world was willing to pay was higher than the price that they were getting domestically. And so this time we are going to do an importing nation where the price that the world is offering is less than the domestic equilibrium price. And you'll see how this entire thing plays out. So to get started, I just made another imaginary market. This time we're going to talk about it in terms of shoes. So this is the market for shoes in the US, you could say. And so market for shoes in the US. So the quantity demanded is equal to 200 minus 2 times the price. So if shoes are free, 200 people want shoes. And then if shoes cost $1, 198 people want shoes, on and on and on. And so I just went ahead and rearranged this into P equals or Y equals right here and graphed it, and then did the same thing for quantity supplied, which is Q is equal to P minus 10. So shifted that over into P equals and went ahead and graphed that, and that's in yellow. So the first part and the starting point for all of these problems is what will be the domestic equilibrium price and quantity before you have trade, before you're open up to trade. And so you can set these two equations equal. You can set this equation equal to this equation and solve for quantity and then plug back in and solve for price. Or you can just graph them and see where they intersect. That does the exact same thing. And so it's quicker just to graph them, and I went ahead and already did that for you guys. So we find that the equilibrium quantity is 60 shoes. 60 shoes at, this would be 50, 60, $70 a pair. $70 a pair. So that is the starting point. So we will have 60 shoes at $70 a pair. And so now we want to see what happens if we open this up to trade. So the next kind of step, as I would like to think about it, is opening it up to trade and seeing what happens. So if the US could trade shoes freely with the rest of the world at $50 a pair, how many shoes would be made, how many pairs of shoes would be made in the US, and how many pairs of shoes would be consumed in the US? So simply put, the rest of the world can make shoes for $50, and let's assume that they can make an infinite amount of shoes for $50. They can keep on pumping shoes out at $50. And this isn't too much of a weird assumption, but it can get kind of funky. You won't deal with it. You won't deal with relaxing that assumption in this class, I don't think. So for now, we're just assuming that you can have as many shoes as you want, and if you can sell them for $50. So in the US market, in the domestic market, and I just use US for domestic because it's easy for Americans, for us to think about, but it could be any domestic nation that you're talking about. So here in the US, when price is equal to 50, that's represented by this green line right here. So I'll underline that in green. And we want to know how many shoes would be consumed, or probably a better word is worn, in the US, and how many shoes would be made or produced in the US. So, well, how many shoes would be consumed? That's just where 50 intersects the demand line. So that's this green point right here. And we can see that that is 100. So that's all you have to do. You could do the exact same thing by plugging in 50 into the demand curve and seeing what happens. And you know what? That actually might be a good exercise to do. So let's go ahead and show how to do this algebraically. So algebraically, we are going to take P is equal to 50, and we are going to plug that into here and solve for Q. So we are going to have 50 is equal to 100 minus 1/2 times Q sub D, quantity demanded. So let's go ahead, we're going to subtract 100 over, and we'll get negative 50 is equal to negative 1/2 Q sub D, and then dividing by negative 1/2, negative 50 divided by negative 1/2, or multiplied by negative 2, is 100. So we will get 100 is equal to quantity demanded. So you can do it either way. You can do it graphically or you can do it algebraically. I like to do it graphically, but either works. They get you the same answer. So 100 people will want shoes in the U.S. But the problem is that at $50, only, let's see what this is, only 40 people, yeah, only 40 pairs of shoes will be produced or supplied in the U.S. So only 40 shoes is equal to the quantity supplied. So we will have a shortage of shoes produced in the U.S. of 60. And so what the U.S. will have to do is it will have to import those shoes. So this answers, hold on one sec, I'll switch colors. This answers right here and right here, answers this top question right here. If the U.S. could trade shoes freely with the rest of the world at $50, how many shoes would be made in the U.S.? 40 shoes would be made in the U.S. And how many shoes would be consumed in the U.S.? 100 would be consumed or worn in the U.S. So the next question is, how do you get those 100 shoes if you're only making 40? And the answer is that you have to import them. So the U.S. would be an importer of shoes. And well, let's go ahead and answer one more thing about importer of shoes. So how many? And this is actually pretty simple to figure out. It's just the difference between the quantity that is produced in the U.S. and the quantity that is consumed in the U.S. So if you grew 10 apples and you ate 20 apples, you have to import the other 10. Same exact thing here. So we just do 100 minus 40 is equal to 60. And so we import 60 shoes. And that is all that we can really say about importer or exporter. And so the last thing that we're going to do is calculate the gains in surplus from trade, from opening up this nation to trade. And so I'll show you the long way first and then the short way to do this. The long way is to go ahead and say, okay, so consumer surplus pre-trade was this triangle. So that was 100 minus 70 is 30. So this right here is 30, 30, and the base of the triangle is from 0 to 60. So we have 60 times 30 divided by 2 is 900. So pre-trade consumer surplus is equal to 900. And now we have to go calculate producer surplus. So pre-trade, trying to grab enough colors so that this stays mildly organized. So pre-trade, producers made all of this. So they made from 70 to 10, this is 60. So a height of 60. I'm sorry, this should go down to there. And then a base again of 60. So 60 times 60 is 3600. Divided by 2 is 1800. So producer surplus is equal to 1800. Sorry, not 18,000 kind of hundred. 1800 with a comma there. And so the total surplus is just the sum of these two. So total surplus will be 2,700, and we measure surplus in dollars. So now we need to calculate after trade. So we'll say post-trade, what the consumer and producer surplus will be. So to go ahead and do that, we just need to redraw our triangles. And so here's what we're going to see. With trade, consumers are going to have this gigantic triangle right here that I'm outlining in blue. And you can see that because we're going all the way out to 100 with our imported shoes at a price of $50 per pair of shoes. So this entire thing is consumer surplus, which is much bigger than that red triangle was before. So to calculate this, we need to do 100 minus 50, which will be 50, and then times 100. So we will have 5,000 divided by 2, 2,500 in consumer surplus. So that will be consumer surplus is equal to 2,500. And if I'm calculating these a little fast, you can go back and check the math. It's just the area of these triangles that I'm drawing. And then because so many of these shoes are imported, domestic producer surplus is going to shrink a bunch, and it's going to shrink all the way down to this red triangle, because that is what is below the price and above the supply line for the amount that the producers in the US are actually producing. So this is 50 minus 10 will be 40, and then the base here will be just this 40 shoes that were produced in the US. So US producers only get the surplus from those shoes that they're producing. So they only get this right here. And so 40 times 40 is 1,600, divided by 2 is 800. So producer surplus is 800, but total surplus has grown. 2,500 plus 800 will be 3,300, I believe. Let me just check that. 2,500, 800, 0, 5 plus 8 is 13. Yeah, 1, 3. Okay, so total surplus has grown from 3,300, or from 2,700 to 3,300. So the gains in surplus from trade are 3,300 minus 2,700, which is $600 of extra surplus gained from trade. So that's the long way to do this. The short way to do this is just to go ahead and see what is the extra triangle that we gain from trade. So it's either on the top if you're an exporter, or on the bottom here if you're an importer. And let me go grab a color that I haven't used before so you can see this. You know what, let's do it in black. So if it's an exporting example, which this one is not, this is an importing example, then it would be this, like a triangle up here. So since we're not doing an exporting example, we're doing an importing example, it's the triangle below the previous equilibrium that is now included. So this triangle in black right here has an area of 600. And so let's see if we can go ahead and figure that out. So we would go ahead and have a base of 100 to 40, which is 60, times from 70 to 50, which is 20. So this height right here is 20, and the base right here is 60. So then that will have an area of 600. And so this is the actual gains from trade. And you can see that this entire area, sorry, I'm kind of running out of colors here, but you can see that this entire area that's all covered up in just neons of colors was already the surplus that we had before trade, and that this in black is the actual extra bit that we gained from trade when we were doing all the diagrams beforehand. So you can calculate it either the long way or the short way, and I'm sorry that this diagram got so kind of messy. There's really no other way to do it. I tried to pick a different color every time. But that is how you calculate the gains in surplus from trade. You can either do the short way and just pick the extra triangle if you see it, or you can go ahead and do it out the long way and calculate the total surplus beforehand and the total surplus after trade. So the final question that I didn't put down here but that I want to go ahead and talk about is who is better off and who is worse off. So pre-trade, consumer surplus was 900, and after trade, consumer surplus was 2,500. So consumers are better off. Consumers are better off. And then the other thing that I want to say is that because producer surplus fell from 1,800 to 800, producers are worse off. Producers are worse off. I should caveat this and say that domestic producers are worse off. And the reason that they're worse off is that it's something that we're very used to about hearing about nowadays, is that globalization has forced them to charge a lower price, and so they aren't as well off as they were beforehand. It's kind of like all the talk that we hear about offshoring jobs to India. Well, that's hurting domestic jobs here. But as a whole, society still benefits from the trade that we experience via the internet, via communication, via ships, so be it. So this right here, this situation that consumers are better off and producers are worse off, is true when you are importing. For an importing nation, all of the above is true. For an exporting nation, exactly the opposite is true. Hold on one second. There's one more thing I want to say before I go on. So consumers are better off, domestic producers are worse off in an importing nation, but society as a whole is better off. And we can see that because total surplus grew from 2,700 to 3,300. So society as a whole is better off. Now, to go ahead and talk about, just go loop back to the previous video and talk a little bit about exporting nations. So in an exporting nation, and you can go verify this with the previous video, I'm not going to go ahead and do it here. So in exporting nation, consumers are worse off. Consumers are worse off. Domestic producers are better off because they now ship their goods abroad and get a higher price for it. Domestic producers are worse off. And then society as a whole is still better off. And you can go see that in the previous video, that all of this goes with the numbers in the picture. So society as a whole is better off. So that should just about cover it for importing, exporting, and gains in surplus from trade, how to calculate them, and kind of the winners and losers from trade in different examples. So I hope that was clear. If it's not, let me know, and I will see you in the next video.